Welcome to Not Your Typical Church Ladies, faith conversations for your real life. I'm Vicky, and each week I am joined with my fellow workers in the vineyard, Anne and Karen, to break open the Sunday scriptures and talk about life and faith and everything in between. Join your not typical church ladies on this journey each week.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our summer podcast series. We are looking at the bread of life discourse in John 6, and things are getting real. We've got 2 weeks left, this week and next week, and Jesus is, he means business. Jesus is meaning some business as we keep going with this. So, hey, Karen and Vicky.
Hey.
How are you guys? Do you guys want to, let's see, well, maybe before we get to the gospel, do you guys want to say anything about the readings in general, or maybe the first reading, second reading? Where would you guys like to start today?
Vicky, you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Well, you were very excited about the first reading, so I thought you could kick us off.
Yeah, you were.
Well, there's like two exciteful things. I mean, overall, like as I was reading this, I'm like, dude, Jesus just like the whole Bible just wants us to have fun. Like there's all this eat and drink, and when we eat and drink, we're nourished and we're thriving, and we're being told by in wisdom in the first reading to live wisely, and in the second reading we're told to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and it's just like, yay. The psalm again is taste and see. We had talked about that last week. So everything is just like, this is great. Think of how everything can be with the love of God. And I love that. Like, I love that yes, it can be this. It not only can, it will be. So I was just like, and I always love wisdom. Wisdom has a special place in my heart because it's the feminine pronoun, and it just makes me feel happy when there's
feminine images
when
of
there's
God.
femininity in our scripture, and but yeah, so that's kind of, there's a lot of thoughts going on in my head with those two readings and then the psalm, but I just love the fact that it's like, it's just all happy, it's like, you got this.
It's cool.
We got this.
A lot of times the first reading connects with the gospel, but this week, the first and second readings, when you read them together, they kind of present this kind of complete picture of what a full life looks like, right?
Yeah.
And like, I do agree with you, Karen. I love the image of wisdom. Like, she's built her home and she's inviting you in to like come and eat and drink and be together. Like, it's a great image of God just calling all of the people together to celebrate and to enjoy the abundance that God's provided for us. And then I feel like the second, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just,
go ahead.
In the community, the communal aspect of it, too, that we're not alone in this, that, we, in the second reading, and now in the second reading, it says, don't get drunk on the wine, but,
You'll come to the feast, come to the feast and party, but just,
and come together.
Not too much.
It's so much nicer when we're in community and we don't have the sense of like we're alone on this journey. Okay, go ahead, finish your thoughts. I'm sorry.
No, well, yeah, it was the same thing actually, because in the second reading, I was going to say it is like they're coming together and God saying like, come to the feast and sing and pray together and give thanks to the Lord but do it together, right? Because that's what we do at Mass. Mass is when we gather together as a community to enjoy the feast that God has put before us and to respond in gratitude. But we pray on our own, and we, of course, in the silence of our hearts and on our own, but like for Catholics especially, like our communal worship is just so important to our identity. And I mean, the Eucharist is everything, right? And that's not something we do alone. We do it together.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite things that stood out in the second reading. Like it begins with saying like, this is not a foolish person, this is a wise, but then it talks about singing and playing and finding joy. And how often do we think we have to do it right? or we're like,
Mhm.
where's the rule book we need to follow? And like part of it is just to delight in God and come together and be, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that wonder in the Eucharist, like to just really remember that this is like this wonderful, beautiful journey that God has led us on, and that we get to sing and play and give thanks. And it doesn't always have to be serious, and that doesn't make us foolish. We're actually being wise by allowing ourselves to fully just embrace ourselves in God.
Yeah, and it goes back to like we need to receive the sustenance that we need. So it's like you said, Vicky, it's not being selfish. And last week we had talked about sometimes you just need a nap and a snack and to be filled. And that we can't do what we're called to do if we are hangry or irritated and all that other stuff. So self-preservation and self-care is definitely not selfish. So everybody remember that.
Yeah. Well, it says it in the first line of the second reading, right? Watch carefully how you live. And like for me, I didn't take that as like oh, don't do all these things, but it's like to live carefully means to live intentionally, right? And with discernment. And so that's part of how like the wisdom comes in. Like it's wisdom, but it's also joy. And like, so to have the wisdom to like follow the things that are really deeply joyful for you. Um, and that just that Ignatian model of discernment and paying attention to where the movements are in your life, where things are like consoling or like desolation, and like using that to make intentional choices and decisions about the kind of life you want to live. Like that's the good life, right? And the Eucharist helps us with that, and being in community helps us with that. And um, I don't know. I always think that like the people I know in my life who have been like the most holy or the most wise are usually also the most joyful and playful in their own ways. It's like they don't take things too seriously. They take things meaningfully, but not like seriously, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, and I was thinking too, Karen, when we went to NCYC in November and the theme was fully alive, right? Like so that quote from St. Irenaeus, like the glory of God is man fully alive. And I think that's what our readings, the first and second readings today and the Psalm are doing. It's like God wants us to be fully alive, right? To live joyfully and to live with deep meaning and to be connected to each other. And the Eucharist helps us to do all those things. Any other thoughts on the first few readings before we move on to the gospel? Okay. All right. Well, here we go. So recap, Jesus takes another turn this week. Recap of the summer so far. So Jesus started by the loaves and fishes, miraculously feeding everyone. And then they followed him because they were so excited about this miracle that they wanted to hear more. And he started to explain that it wasn't just physical food, but spiritual food that was important. And then he went further by saying that, oh, by the way, he was the spiritual food that God was going to provide. And that was last week when we started to see people being like, huh, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And today Jesus really brings it full circle today he's insisting that he's not just talking metaphorically. He really means what he says. And he's going to give us his flesh to eat. And it's not just that God provides us what we need to live, it's that God is what we need to live. So yeah, what do you guys want to say about that and like how amazing the Eucharist is?
I feel like I've talked a lot. Vicky, do you want to start?
I think one of my, when he gets to this point in this discourse, one of the things, and I wonder who else has a story like this, but the moment when you started to really like dive into your faith and truly like start connecting in a deeper way to what the Eucharist really is. For me, that was in high school. I share a lot. I was like I was very much a lapsed Catholic most of my like life until high school. And I remember like being on retreat that I was forced on. It's a really great story for another time. But all of a sudden just being like, oh, and the sense of calm and healing that came after receiving Eucharist, having not received it for such a long time. And just, again, how fast sometimes we're at Mass and we're just like, especially if you have children or lots of things going on, trying to corral everyone. But those moments right after and how precious they are in a life that can be so crazy, in a life we go 10 million miles an hour. And for me, that sense of like peace and healing that can come from it, that can only come from him.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I love I love my job because I'm able to work with kids who are preparing to receive for the first time. And I don't know what a greater joy, I mean, receiving myself obviously is a great joy. Watching my children receive is a great joy. But there's something like, I always want to watch the parents actually of the kids receiving because they're so excited for their child to come to the table and participate with them. And the kids are so excited. And, we had a couple kids this year, they were like running up the altar to Father Rob. And it was just like, even though they don't maybe mentally all get it, but they get it, and watching them want to receive. I had a little girl, a sister of one of the girls, and she's like a year younger, and she's like, when is it going to be my time? Like, she was like, I'm ready now. And it was just like, if we all could have that sense of like, I'm ready, like, it's just
excitement.
Excitement, and not just like, okay, I'm standing in line waiting, doing all that, but like, we tend to think of our spiritual needs as like optional, like, oh, if I get to pray, I will. If I get to church, I will. But like, our physical food is not optional, right? Like, we need that food. Vicky and I were just saying we were hangry like in the last couple of days, just like, dude, you don't want to be, I know you don't want to be around me. I'm not speaking for Vicky, but like, you don't want to be around me when I'm hangry. But like, that is a basic need, right? That physical food. But how excited would we all be if we turned that and was like, no, our physical food is just as important. And we need that to be able to sustain us. It's not an option. And when we come to that, knowing that we are receiving it, I mean, I always look at it as I receive and I'm like on a high. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Then we get discharged from Mass. We have that beautiful blessing, go out and love and serve the Lord and one another. And I'm like, yeah, I love everybody. And then by like Thursday and Friday, I'm like, Urgh. And I can't wait to have that Mass participation to be able to get that, okay, that spiritual food back in me, and that's what I also love about having the opportunity of daily Mass. I'm after the Ignatian spirituality that I did, I was like, all right, I'm going to daily Mass Tuesday, Thursday. And it was such a powerful witness, not only to me, but like for everybody else, because it is such a tight group of people who come to daily Mass. And but they're super welcoming. They're like, hey, we're so glad. So if you haven't had the opportunity to attend a daily Mass, maybe if you're on a vacation day during the week for the summer, Monday and Wednesdays are at Transfiguration. Now this is too early for me. It's at 6:45, but Tuesday, Thursdays are at St. Catherine's at 9. And there's just a different it's the same mass, right?
It's a different mood. It's a different
But
feeling. Daily
it's a
masses.
different feeling receiving during the week than on the weekend. I don't know. It for me. I don't know about you guys, but
I think part of that for us is that on Sundays we're in work mode. The three of us are definitely in work mode on Sundays. We're working during the week too, but I do feel when I go to daily mass, it just it feels like it's more for me. It's just quieter and it's more yeah, I can feel like I can be more present. It's just a different thing. I'm gonna try to do it for the summer too, because we have been pretty good about going, you know, once every couple of weeks. So I'm gonna try to do that over the summer. And you know what? Since the teens are off of school, teens, I'm gonna invite you guys too. I mean, there's no reason why we can't meet at mass and have donuts afterwards or something on like a Tuesday. So I think we're gonna do that. Let's do that. You know, speaking of daily mass, when I miss the days, like, 'cause when I went to a Catholic college and a Jesuit college, and that was the period of my life when I was an almost daily mass goer, and it was because they had a 10 p.m. Daily mass at 10 at night, and I am much more of a night owl than a morning bird by nature, and so that would be my study break. Like I would study and do, you know, I would write papers or whatever, and I would take a break at 10 p.m. to go to mass, and then I would go back to my dorm room and work for a couple more hours. And having daily mass in the middle of the night like that was a really cool, intimate experience. And I think that I don't know, that was a really special time in my life. And I couldn't do it now. I don't know any priest who would be saying this at 10 p.m. But it was, I don't know, it was just quiet and it was very intimate, and the Eucharist was very real to me in that time. So yeah. I was also thinking, Karen, we were talking about the little kids.
Yeah.
And the younger siblings being so excited and jealous almost when the older siblings get to do. I really feel like both of my kids, they were ready when they were 7, like when they were in 2nd grade, but when they were 6 and when they were in 1st grade, man, that was the open moment.
Yeah.
When they were like begging for it, you know? So I know we have rules about when we can do first communion. From experience as a parent, like I wish I could have done it a year earlier with my kids, because that's when they had the hunger and the wonder, you know, even more.
Yeah.
It was funny. I had one of my college girlfriends came to visit me for the eclipse this spring, and she brought her 3 kids who are like 3rd grade, 2nd grade, and then like kindergarten, preschooler. And the little guy, like his middle sister was preparing to make her first communion like in a few weeks when they came to mass with us. But the little guy, he wanted he would try to like not steal the Eucharist, but like he was excited because he was going to a church where like the priest didn't know he wasn't supposed to get it. And like he kind of thought that maybe he could sneak into the line and like they wouldn't know that he really wasn't old enough to get the Eucharist. It was so funny. But just that desire, you know, that desire for God, I just love it. Kids are the best.
And when do we lose that? Like,
I know.
You know, I was just thinking about that. Like, I think for me in working in ministry, like you were saying, like sometimes the weekends don't feel as mine. Like I don't feel as fed, because I feel like I'm helping everybody else get fed, that I'm taking like the last portions. But like when do we lose that? When do we lose that excitement? Or do we? You know, I know that there are some parishioners. I love watching they're older, but they receive together. They're husband and wife, and they don't stand in front or in back of each other. They stand side by side and they receive together, and they wait until both of them have communion in their hand, and then they both receive. And it is just like, it's such a beautiful witness that they want to share that together. And it's like, I don't know, how can we get that excitement for everybody? I don't know. Like, that's just
that moment too after communion. You're like, sometimes I get so moved at Mass, not just when I receive the Eucharist, but when I'm watching other members of the community receive, and like just the look on their face afterwards as they're walking back, you really can see, like sometimes there are tears, sometimes there's just like a profound, just like faith. I mean, it's a graced moment to be a part of. Because it's so, like, we talk about the real presence of Jesus, like you can see it happening almost sometimes with people. When they're hungry for comfort, like when they're grieving, and I mean, we've seen this, all these moments, people come to the table in times of celebration and in times of trauma, and it, like every moment in between, and it's just such a grace to see a community come together week after week, Sunday after Sunday, to receive Jesus and to become Jesus. I don't know.
There is one lady at Transfiguration that I love to watch, and I'm not going to call her out, but she always receives last, and she sits right in the front, but she waits, and she's just like, she takes it in her hand, and she must say a prayer, and then she receives, and then she just stands there for a moment. And then she walks back. It's not like she almost makes me realize that it's not a conveyor belt. Like we're not on this conveyor belt of receiving communion. Just like she is so present, and the witness, and like just everything about it. So I challenge everybody, instead of just going back to your pew and praying, maybe keep your eyes open and just look around you, and there's a beautiful witness, like you said, Anne, in people's eyes and their body language, and the younger kids coming up with their hands and they're just so excited to receive a blessing. There's just so much going on, and that Jesus we've all taken a part in that together, but it's nourishing us in so many different ways.
Anything else you want to say about today's readings or the Mass? We covered a lot. I think that's a good place. All right. Well, I hope you guys all can take a minute this week at Mass to appreciate the gift of Jesus in the Eucharist and in our communities together. And maybe make it to daily Mass if you can sometime this week. That would be amazing. All right, you guys, we got one more week to go. So enjoy your summer days, and we will catch you back here in 1 week for the last installment of the Bread of Life discourse.
Yes.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye. On behalf of Anne, Karen, and myself, thank you again for listening to this episode of Faith Conversations for Your Real Life. Please make sure to subscribe to wherever you're listening or watching this episode. You can find the readings linked in the description box below, and we can't wait to see you again next time on Faith Conversations for Your Real Life with your favorite not so typical church ladies.